And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 99th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We are recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, July 30th, 2019, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. On the docket for tonight, the Hoosiers now have their first basketball commit for the class of 2020. Trey Galloway announced this past Friday that he committed to Indiana University and the Hoosiers. We'll discuss what this means for the program before moving on to talking about our last class in our summer series, the freshman class for this upcoming season. Here with me tonight, I'm back, and the gang is all here. Matt, how are you doing this evening? One episode shy of our 100th episode.
I'm doing just fine, my friends. You know, it's always nice here in the state of Florida. It was like 95 degrees outside today and felt like 105 when I was in Orlando, which was like doubly as hot because there's like no breeze from the ocean. So it was great. It was awesome. Gotta love it.
Doing better, Nathan, than Matt?
Man, geez, complaining about Florida. Wow.
Yeah.
What a high, lofty throne you sit upon. No, I'm doing great. It's funny. I feel like I've said this before. We're in the middle of the summer. It doesn't feel like there should be too much to talk about yet. Once again, we've got football news, basketball commitments. IU still searching for the final assistant coach on the staff. I mean, there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, I feel like all of the basketball news outlets, podcasts, and everything are just waiting for the assistant coach so that every podcast has something to actually talk about. But Trey Galloway gave us that gift this past Friday to where we have something to talk about. The drought is over. We finally have another commitment to Indiana, technically, since Trayce Jackson Davis, if you don't count Joey Brunk, sort of, kind of. But Trey Galloway, four-star recruit out of the Culver Academies in Culver, Indiana, committed to the Hoosiers this past Friday, July 26th. He is and of course, all of the measurements vary from site to site, but a 6'4", about 200-pound shooting guard, and is ranked 121st on 247 Sports. The 22nd best shooting guard so far in the class, and the second best player from Indiana in 2020 behind Anthony Leal, who recently announced, which we can get to later, his decision was down to either Stanford or Indiana. Galloway is also the sixth in-state player, seventh if you include Joey Brunk, and he's also the fourth straight Indiana recruit that Archie has had, fifth if you include Joey, to commit under Archie since becoming the head coach over the past 2 years. So before we break down a little bit of his game, actually, Nathan, I want to get your initial reaction when you heard that Trey Galloway was the first commit that Archie would get in the 2020 class.
Well, personally, I was excited simply because it's just another Indiana high school player committing to play for Archie Miller. It's the seventh Indiana kid that Archie Miller's gotten. And look, there's not much downside to that. It doesn't matter if the guy comes in and plays 20 minutes a game his freshman year, or he doesn't hit the floor until his junior or senior season. It's always good to find kids that want to play for Indiana. This is a guy who was offered by Butler and Iowa and Michigan State, so he's clearly a highly regarded player. And, all in all, look, he's a 6'4", 200-pound guard. He's going to be a valuable addition to the backcourt. And all of a sudden, you start formulating Indiana's roster in your mind, and starting next year and beyond, you think, okay, we got Robert Finney in the backcourt. He's going to be joining Armaan Franklin, and now it's Trey Galloway. Now all of a sudden you can see some depth in the backcourt, which will complement the front court depth that IU looks to have as early as this coming season.
Mm-hmm. And especially with Trey Galloway, I think when his name first started appearing on the Indiana basketball watch list, which I guess has been at least a couple of years, that he's been at least on the radar, but more recently since he's been actually offered, I think people didn't necessarily know who he was, since this class, of course, for Indiana is not as the cream of the crop as good as it typically is. And you might have questioned why Archie might want someone like this, but as you start to read up a little more on him, you get to see that he is that, like you said, Nathan, that he's going to play for Indiana. He wants to play there. Like we'll get into. He said he wanted to commit first because he wants to get other guys to come to the program with him and the rest of the team. So I think that's definitely something to be happy about, more or less. So Matt, what were your initial reactions when you heard that Trey was the first guy to commit?
I was excited. I saw a lot of people go, but can he shoot? ? Which I laughed at them because he's shooting 43% from three in AAU ball this summer. He did shoot 27% as a junior in high school, but
he had a wrist injury.
He had a wrist injury, and we all know what wrist injuries do to decent shooters, right, Romeo? So look, I like him a lot. He's tough as nails. I think that's the first thing when you watch this guy. It's like he's one of those players that's just going to drive opposing fan bases crazy because he's going to be the first person on the floor hustling for a ball. And it doesn't matter if there's a knee where his face is going to go, he's going to get the ball. So I'm sure he's going to be a pest for other fan bases in the Big Ten coming in the upcoming years. He's a really good finisher with both hands. Reads the game really well, cuts really well. I think he's like a guy who can come in as a freshman, and even if he's not shooting very well, can come off the bench and at least get a bucket or two. He's just got that skill set. He's quick, he's shifty, he's smart. Everything you want in a Big Ten guard is what he's got, especially in a 4-year Big Ten guard. So I'm really excited. I think he's a great addition. I really like that he's trying to recruit people. And some people were talking about, he's trying to recruit Anthony Leal. I think we're about as in good of a position with Anthony Leal as you possibly can be. Like he's from Bloomington. He grew up in Bloomington. He grew up an IU fan, apparently. His mom works at IU.
Both parents work at IU.
Both parents work at IU. I don't think we could possibly be in any better situation with him. So what he's talking about recruiting people is I think he's talking about recruiting people in the next class, the class coming up, the class of 2021, which is far and away the best class that in the state of Indiana has had in the last 4 or 5 years. Look, Christian Lander is like the number one point guard in the class. Caleb First is one of the top forwards in the class. You have a bunch of other kids in and around the top 50 to top 80 recruits inside the state. And Trey is somebody that's known in and around the state, plays with Christian Lander and Anthony Leal on the Adidas AAU team. I think it's Indiana Elite for Indiana. So him being able to recruit those big time guys coming up in the 2021 class is what I believe he's really talking about when he's talking about recruiting people. And I am excited for him to be a Hoosier and see him in those lovely candy stripes that we have.
Yeah, and to go off your recruiting point, yes, of course he's recruiting Anthony Leal. He's one. Excuse me, he's one of his better friends. They text all the time. There was, of course, the post recently that he and Trey and Anthony and a couple other guys were hanging out on the 4th of July itself. So they're definitely good friends. He has even said he's texted him multiple times after he committed on Friday. So I'd love to have you here. Of course, it's your decision, but definitely want you here since they're great friends. They play with each other, obviously. But to Matt's point, he even mentioned how pivotal Trayce and Armaan's recruiting was in his own recruiting coming up into it, because he said once IU technically offered him, Trayce and Armaan were texting him all the time, literally daily, trying to get him to see if he'd be able to come to Indiana. And you might think, oh, why would they text him right as soon as they offer? Why didn't they care beforehand? Well, you don't know if Archie's going to offer him, so you can't really text him, hey, come to IU, when IU doesn't necessarily want him yet. So you see that he was, So you see that he was an important guy. As soon as he got offered, Trayce and Armaan were like, hey, come here. And I know Trayce and Armaan are still recruiting Anthony, let alone even people all the way down to Christian, even if like Trayce isn't going to be there by that time. But I love this, at least in-state camaraderie, that everyone's trying to be like, hey, let's go play for Indiana. It's not just, and as this is more of a compliment to Purdue, that's not just all about Purdue right now. Indiana's starting to get back into it and trying to get back to competing in a state level, Big Ten level, and then, of course, up to a national level. But let's get into more of the skill set that he has. We'll talk about some skills, some weaknesses, and I was going to talk about recruiting, but we basically already talked about the importance that he wants to bring to the table for his recruiting and the future recruits. But let's talk a little bit about his skills. I think if you look at him right away, you see that because you see the word guard, but he's definitely a bigger guard, at least for college basketball. So he's a guy that will potentially play a couple positions, or definitely at least defend a couple positions, depending on what Archie might want to use him for. But he does have a lot of those guard aspects. He's got a great basketball IQ. He is a pretty good passer. And like Matt talked about, he's a big playmaker. At last year, averaged 16 points per game, 6.8 rebounds, something like that. And so that's basically off of just looking at him. Then you get into, when you see or hear a lot about what he does, you see that he's a very big two-way guard, that not only can he have some offensive plays, but he's a very good defensive player. And if you ask, from what I've seen, most people that have seen him play, it looks like his defense and his intensity on the defensive end is actually what it really is his biggest strength, if you will, which of course under Archie Miller, that's the kind of guy that Archie loves. So I'll kick it over to Nithin so I don't have to take up too much stuff. So Nithin, have you observed that when you've watched him, read about him, add anything, take away?
Absolutely. I mean, look, what's the word we constantly hear associated with Archie Miller's defensive system? It's pack line, pack line, pack line. And when you think of Leal, he's an athletic, versatile, guard who's going to be able to collapse to the rim if he needs to. He could fan out to the three-point arc if necessary. He can affect passing lanes with his hands. And I thought Kyle Nedenreep of the Indy Star, who's covered Indiana high school basketball for a long time, said it very well. He said, look, in 2019, when you look at recruiting rankings, regardless of whatever database you use, defense is kind of undervalued. It's underrated. People like the dunks and the athleticism and the three-point shooting. Galloway is going to contribute in the intangible area, in the defensive areas. He's going to be coachable. He's going to be, we talked about the camaraderie that he brings to the team. This is exactly the kind of guy that Archie Miller had in droves at Dayton, and that's what led them to as much success as they had. So that's what I'm looking forward to seeing in Galloway. But now look, if he improves his three-point shot, if he continues to accelerate his sophomore, junior, senior years, and we're looking a lot of years down the road here, but now all of a sudden you've got a valuable contributing piece to hopefully what could be a Big Ten championship or national championship contending squad.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Nathan said. When talking about Trey, the first thing that jumps out at you is, he can play the 3 or the 2, because it says he can play both. He's a taller guard. And it's something that I think we've talked about on the podcast before, where Archie has in the past enjoyed using 3 guards at a time on the floor at the same time. So, and Trey would be perfect for that. He'd be the perfect third guard, as a larger guard that can switch on to small forwards. But I think if I had to pick out a weakness for Trey, look, shooting consistency. Yeah, let's get that hand healthy, and then maybe he'll be more consistent. He shot well this summer. I'd like to see that continue into the high school season for his senior year. And he only played, I think, 11.9 minutes per game last year. At the varsity level, he played 24.3 as a sophomore. So getting on the court and staying on the court is valuable. And then also, he's tall, so he gets away with being really good on defense, especially at an AAU level and at an Indiana high school level. But when he gets to college, he's going to have to bulk up more, and that's something that he's going to have to hit the weight room hard. That's probably not going to be a problem with Cliff Marshall, the weight training coach for the basketball program, but that is something he's going to have to work on. And the physicality of the Big Ten and how physical, Division I basketball is going to be a little bit of a culture shock for him, having been the tallest guard on the floor probably most of his life. So,
yeah, exactly. Which talked about being a taller guard. He probably might potentially on specific lineups could be playing a wing position a lot of the times. But Nathan, what kind of weaknesses have you seen when you've been watching some of the tape from his game?
Well, I mean, I thought the point on him being tall was interesting, but I think the weight room situation applies to almost every single high school
Oh yeah.
player except like Zion. I mean, outside of him, it feels like every incoming freshman, probably the area where they need to improve most is that. And look, the jump shooting thing is real. I mean, it's in 2019 especially. 2020 is when Galloway will be joining the Hoosiers. The 3-point shot is as prevalent as ever. And if he can't improve in that area, there are going to be some concerns. But look, other than that, I mean, this is a Culver Military Academy kid. He brings toughness. He's a glue guy. We'll see how he adapts and adjusts once his playing time starts at IU. But I don't see an issue here where he's going to complain about playing time. I don't see an issue where he's going to create any sort of disruption with his teammates. And frankly, that sort of thing is extremely valuable for any big college basketball program.
And something that's a little bit underrated about him, I really like that he's going to the Culver Academy. I have a bunch of friends that graduated from there that were in my major with me. They're always some of the most organized, most like diligent students, and that's going to be a wonderful thing for this freshman class. I know I remember as a freshman going in, I had no idea what to expect from college. Look, they're athletes, so they're on a schedule, and they have to be really good about being on schedule. And Trey is going to just walk into that and be able to do that so easily. He's going to be such a great role model for the other freshmen in this incoming class. It's something a little bit underrated, but showing that off the court leadership is something he's going to be able to come in and do from day one.
Well, you talked about the Culver Academy and the schedule he has. I was reading up on what they have to do. He literally is going to college more or less for the schedule stuff. They have mandatory breakfast in the morning. They have 4 classes from 8:30 to 3:15. Then they have practices until 6. They have dinner somewhere in there between 6 and 8. That's again mandatory that everyone has to go to. Then they've got from 8 to 10, I read something like that, is homework, in bed by 11, so you can get up and do everything the same way the next day. So yeah. What were you going to say, Nathan?
Well, that's the thing. And this is a guy who, if Matt Painter and Mike Bray and Dane Fife and Tom Izzo at Michigan State, if they offer you, that's a pretty good sign in and of itself. So I can't wait to see how he comes into IU next year and how he develops after that, because I'm sure he's going to be a very important part of whatever IU accomplishes when he's in the program.
Yep. Matt, what are you looking for Trey to be developing the most as he goes into his senior year and then into Indiana?
Yeah, like I said, probably consistency in shooting. I think he's got everything else down packed pretty much for as far as an incoming freshman guard. Look, just getting better at everything, but especially shooting. So
yeah, I agree, because I saw that once he starts to get a little tired, his shot gets a little flat. Doesn't go in as much as it used to. But like Matt mentioned, with the wrist injury, we'll have to see the consistency he has. So I think his senior year will be a good tell for what his shooting can start to be. And hopefully he'll be able to keep continuing shooting at a high level. And because now that he's got to jump even farther back when you go from high school to college with that 3-point line. So hopefully the consistency will be able to get there. From what I was looking, he's a good playmaker under the rim. But again, those are some of the athletes. And again, he's played against a lot of top talent. He plays in a lot of big games with some high recruits, but of course the people he's banging down low with, the centers are as tall as him, and he's technically a guard. So we'll have to see what kind of strength he has, and maybe more quickness and agility under the basket that he'll start to develop. And of course, once he gets with Cliff, once he gets to Indiana, he's going to get bulkier, he's going to get quicker. So that's the kind of stuff that I think he should develop, but he's definitely going to be able to and should develop.
I did like the comment you made there, Noah. It's not like he's just going up against scrubs. Last year, according to Jeff Sagarin, Culver played the 10th toughest high school schedule in the state. So it's not like he was going up against, small, puny, YMCA, backyard basketball kids. He went up against some tough competition, and Culver's made back-to-back state title games in Class 3A. So this guy, look, not perfect by any means, but I think he's going to be a valuable contributor.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, back-to-back state, he says now that he's recruiting for Indiana, he's finished that part. He's got his school. He's going to look forward to trying to win another state championship, which great for him. Hope they use, excuse me, hope they do. Now we talked, we can touch briefly for a second on Anthony Leal, Stanford and Indiana. I think the podcast people that have been able to talk about this since then have just said, since those two schools are basically two completely opposite schools, if he ends up picking Stanford over Indiana, you can't really fault him just because of the high level of academics that Stanford has, the kind of player, and just he'd be the guy at Stanford and everything. I just saw Matt and Nathan nod their head yes and everything, so I think we're in agreement. Of course, this is a guy that's wanted to go to Indiana basically since forever, and it would hurt to lose the top rated player in Indiana, especially a guy that would go great next to Trey. But going up against Stanford, that's kind of hard to say no to that type of academic program.
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of the best schools in the world. So
yeah, exactly. And when you have the grades and the wills and the ability to go to Stanford, especially for free, then definitely wouldn't take it away from anyone to be able to do that. But speaking of some of the recruits, Caleb Love today just said he's going to cut his list down this Friday, August 2nd. So be on the lookout this second to see if Caleb Love still has interest in the Hoosiers. But that's at least
I'm pretty sure it was leaked that we are in the final 6. So,
which doesn't surprise me, especially with 6 schools. But officially, look out on Friday to see if Indiana is in it. Which even with 6 schools, I think everyone would have expected Indiana to be in the last 6 anyway. But yeah. All right, let's move on to who won the week, Nathan.
Well, it's where do I start with this? I mean, there's been a lot of IU news coming through the last few days. How about basketball? We've got some professional contracts being handed out to some former Hoosiers. Juwan Morgan signed a 2-way deal with the Utah Jazz. So he is going to be going back and forth between the Salt Lake City Stars, which is Utah's G League team. And, every now and then he'll be called up to the NBA Utah Jazz to play for them. I saw some comments made by Tony Jones, who's a Utah Jazz beat writer, who said the Jazz are very interested and excited and intrigued about Morgan as a professional player. So even if he doesn't get a ton of NBA time this coming year, keep your eye out in the years to come. Not just Juwan Morgan, though. We've seen James Blackman Jr., Evan Fitzner even record pro contracts as well. And then, outside of basketball, we had some big time swimming news. We talked about Lily King last week. She just added a couple of ho-hum gold medals to her record at the FINA World Championships in South Korea. No big deal. Olympic champion, world champ, whatever. Easy peasy. But there were a couple others as well. Zach Apple and Blake Peroni, who are post-grad members of the swimming and diving program. They had podium finishes as well. So, this is a big-time international competition, and you're seeing IU swimming and diving program once again accomplishing some great things. How about soccer player Justin Rennicks? He was in the MLS homegrown game earlier tonight. An IU player. He plays for the New England Revolution. He's part of All-Star Week in the MLS. So all in all, pretty interesting stuff going on in IU sports. And, you just got to stay tuned in. I mean, this is the off season.
Yeah. And then let alone, of course, the basketball program getting their first commit for the class of 2020. And that's not the only thing to talk about, especially in almost August, the beginning of August. It's great to have so much content to be able to discuss.
We didn't even talk about last week when the Cubs were playing the Giants. Kyle Schwarber and Alex Dickerson were going head-to-head, 2 IU baseball players. I think, in fact, one play during the series last week, I think Dickerson threw Schwarber out at home, or Schwarber almost threw Dickerson out. I mean, it's pretty cool to see IU making an impact in all these different sports across the international spectrum. It's pretty neat.
Matt, speaking of the Exhibit 10 contract that Juwan signed, do you know much about that, or should I try and explain as best as I can this very ambiguous, not very known contract?
Yeah, you should probably just try. I would, if I was trying to explain it, I'd get it too complicated up. So
which it is complicated. And this is just check our article out on IndianaHQ.com. This is where, as best as people can explain it, it's explained as pretty well there. They're 1-year deals, worth the minimum salary. None of it's guaranteed, though. A lot of the compensation is tied to bonuses and just how the player is able to stick with their team for a certain period of time. So basically, Juwan has an in, more or less, to try and stay with the Jazz and their G League affiliate, the Salt Lake City Stars, so he can try and basically just prove his worth a little more and get on the G League affiliate team, which I think that's his best chance at getting into it. I'm not sure how because he performed well, but he wasn't extraordinary at Summer League. So I'm not sure if a two-way contract is, unless he has some huge breakout. I personally don't know if a two-way contract is in his future, at least this specific season, but hopefully he can stay with the Salt Lake City Stars or at least another G League affiliate team. But these Exhibit 10 contracts can be converted to a formal two-way contract. So basically it's just saying, from what I can gather, that the Jazz are interested in him. And with this new bargaining agreement contract thing, good news for Juwan, at least. So he's not getting cut right now.
Yeah, it's basically a little bit more formal invitation to the training camp. That's basically what it is. So
yep. And as Andrew said in the chat, also a lot of the football, so go to the football side, a lot of the Hoosiers this past week were put on the preseason watch list for football. So that's also something else to watch out for.
And then from a pro standpoint, we saw Jonathan Crawford sign on with Tennessee. I saw that Chris Covington got over a hamstring injury. The former IU linebacker is in Dallas's training camp with those getting underway. That's exciting. So, yeah, I mean, it's going on everywhere.
Me, as the resident Steelers fan, I've got, since I work with another website, I have people out at Steelers training camp. And the very first day, T. Gray Scales was playing with the second team defense, which is something literally all Pittsburgh fans did not see coming. And if from day one, T. Gray Scales was playing snaps, starting with the second team defense, as an inside linebacker, when again, there's only two inside linebackers for what the Steelers used to do. That means technically he's on the third and fourth from what the Steelers have seen. That's really, really good news, because right now he's playing above veteran players that have proved their worth more or less as a backup inside linebacker. So he's got a long way to go. But yet, to add on to Nathan's point, another good thing for a former Hoosier. Before we talk so much about everything else, let's move on to the freshman class. We've done the senior, the junior, the sophomore classes. Now we're going to finish up, since, of course, there's not as many freshmen as some of the other ones that might make a huge impact. We're definitely not going to talk about every single one of them, but we're going to mention just a few. First for the football, then the basketball that will make an impact. Of course, basketball, definitely much more chance to make an impact, but there are a few freshmen that might have the chance to contribute to this football team, other than just practicing. QB, we have waited very long to talk about Michael Penix Jr. and Jack Tuttle, and we could make an entire episode on this between both of these two, but I think it's, at least for now, pretty easy to say that Michael Penix Jr., Jack Tuttle will be fighting for a starting spot. They both have potential to have a very big impact on this team. We've got a lot of depth at the QB position. Don't know what else, much more there is to say unless we did an entire episode on it. Do you agree, Matt?
Yep, I agree. Look, they're obviously in the running. I think Coach Allen has talked about it multiple times. We've talked about it multiple times. I'm excited, and I hopefully the best person wins. So, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just for the team, whoever can win the most games.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then those first two games, I'm going to be excited to see how much playing time Penix and Tuttle get, because most people probably argue that those first two games against Ball State and Eastern Illinois are the ones where hopefully the Hoosiers get out to a good lead. And then, we'll see how many snaps Penix and Tuttle get. I remember last year in the season opener against Florida International, Penix had some playing time. So that'll be something interesting to keep an eye out for, regardless of who's named the starter. Tom Allen said that Ramsey is the returning guy, so the other two will have to beat him out. But it is an open competition. We'll see who comes out on top.
Yeah, like we've said, Ramsey probably will end up being the starter at the beginning, but he also did 100% say it's an open competition. So I think a lot of Hoosier Nation doesn't want to see Peyton Ramsey start at quarterback, even though there's a lot of other reasons we could talk about why I don't think it's the end of the world, but definitely an open competition that those two guys are hopefully going to be able to have their shot. Running back, I think the biggest, there are a couple running backs in the freshman class, redshirt freshmen, regular freshmen, that might be able to contribute on a normal year, but this year, this running back class is just so deep. We've already talked about 3 or 4 running backs, and yet we still haven't even talked about Samson James, the highest rated recruit that Indiana has gotten period. That of course committed to Ohio State, decommitted. We already talked about him a lot, but at least unless Stevie Scott has some big fall off, we've already talked about it. He's going to be the main guy, but Samson James, man, I think he's going to be able to have a chance to get some snaps. This running back committee, the depth chart is definitely not solidified. I don't think it's going to be solidified the entire season. It's just going to be best man up is going to be able to contribute. I think we're going to be able to see some cool things from Samson James.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with a lot of these true freshmen, we're going to see them play in at least 3 games. Look, the new 3 games you can play in and then redshirt rule, I think is wonderful. I think we've definitely talked about it multiple times. Again, on the podcast, I keep bringing that up. Watch some of our old podcasts, listen to them. We talk about this all the time. But look, Samson is going to get minutes, and I would not be surprised to see him as a second-string running back and then not be redshirted and get a hell of a lot of snaps next year. I expect great things from him. He's one of the best recruits that IU has ever gotten in the recruiting rankings since the recruiting rankings have been a thing. So I can't be more excited to see Samson James as Hoosier.
Yeah, so first of all, Matt, that's a 4-game redshirt rule. I think you knew that. I think you just accidentally said 3.
I definitely said 3.
Yeah, just by mistake. But it's funny, at Big Ten Media Day a couple of Thursdays ago, I asked Tom Allen, Stevie Scott, sophomore running back, pretty young guy, had an impressive season. What does Allen expect of Scott this coming year? And Tom Allen took that question and made it very clear that Stevie Scott would not be entitled to anything this upcoming year. And I think something is gnawing at him in the back of his head, like, hey, we have this jewel type of player in Samson James, who obviously chose to come to IU because he wants to play immediately. He could have gone to a place like Ohio State where he committed originally, but then he would have had to wait a couple years. So when you've got a guy like Samson James, and also don't overlook Ivory Winters, who's a freshman coming in, this is going to be a very competitive backfield. And that's good. As Tom Allen said, and as the saying goes, iron sharpens iron. This is going to be very fun to see who comes out on top. Samson James will play. How impactful will he be? It'll be who knows?
Yeah, exactly. I think who knows is the fairest and most true point in that statement is just because we have no idea, which as a good thing. It's not we have no idea because this running back class is so bad. It's this running back class has a lot of potential to be really, really good. So that's a good, we'll have to see, kind of like the QBs. Wide receiver room is, I think, at the top of the depth chart, pretty solidified. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of these freshmen we're going to talk about, you will see during games just because of that 4-game rule. And you want to see if, hey, maybe this guy's like a breakout player and you have no idea. But 2 names to potentially see if you see on the names of the back of their jerseys, which, yes, names will be on the back of their jerseys. Reminder, you might see Miles Marshalls or Jacoby Hewitt for a few snaps this season. They redshirted last year. They're redshirt freshmen this year. So those might be 2 guys to see. Any other names potentially in the wide receiver room, guys?
Yeah, I'm really interested in Jordan Jakes. He's a 6'5" wide receiver from Baltimore. And just the numbers 6 and 5 next to wide receiver jump out to me. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get some snaps, maybe even towards the red zone.
6'5" is very tall in football.
Yes.
That's exactly the name that I was going to mention. Tom Allen talked about him by name once or twice during Big Ten Media Day a couple of weeks ago. So he could be an interesting option. Again, while it's clear on the surface that Nick Westbrook and Donovan Hill will start, who knows? Guys might get injured. Guys might, off the field stuff. Anything can happen. At which point, maybe some of these freshmen do get extended playing time.
Yep. Same thing with tight end class. You've got Peyton Hendershot, Matt Jorson with the tight ends, but you're going to have some people go out, so you might be able to see some TJ Ivory. That's one of the names I saw. Did you guys see any other tight end names?
Gary Cooper.
Oh, yeah. Good call. Good call there. The thing with Ivy is, he's a Chicago kid, redshirt freshman, definitely could make an impact this year. Kalen DeBoer loves to use those tight ends, so it's not going to be just one guy. The whole room will be involved this year. It'll be fun to see how they get used.
which I was not here last week for your sophomore class, and I didn't get to talk about Peyton Hendershot, my favorite player last year. So especially with Kalen DeBoer, oh my goodness, I am so excited for Peyton Hendershot. Oh my goodness, that's my lack of words just shows you how excited I am for Peyton Hendershot this year. And I think he's going to be, honestly, I think he's going to be one of the best players for this team this year. I think he's going to be able to contribute so much. Linemen, even with playing. So this is my opinion, at least. Even with playing the 4 game that you have for being able to redshirt, you can play 4 games, still get a redshirt. With some of the of course the linemen aren't very good, but that's a position that you don't. It's usually more of the skill positions. You see some of these players come in for a few snaps. It's kind of hard for the linemen to be able to, hey, I'm going to play this one game, but not the rest of these games. So I think it's going to be harder to see some of these redshirt freshmen actually get time unless there's an injury. Do you guys agree or disagree? Is there any specific freshmen you think might be able to come up and see times during games specifically?
No, I think I basically agree with your point. There's no one that really stands out. Who knows? I mean, look, honestly, we talked about kind of the highlight player on offense in Samson James. It's tough to break in as a freshman in general, you know. The Stevie Scott and Rondale Moore type performances that we saw at a freshman are pretty rare. And I get those are true freshmen. We're also including red shirts in this group, but you know, it's tough to make an immediate impact.
Yeah, it is. All right, before we go on to the defense, are you subscribed to our show yet? You can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platforms you listen to podcasts. Just search for it, The Hoosier Sound, or hang with us live on YouTube Tuesday evenings at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. At The Hoosier Sound and at Indiana HQ for Twitter and Facebook. Follow us for news and updates, and check out our website, indianahq.com, because all of the information is right there, one place if you forget the 20,000 things we've told you at one podcast. In addition, I am now repping some merchandise that we have on our store. So if you're on the YouTube, you can see our merchandise that we have on the website. So go check that out. If you did not get to see me repping it, maybe you should start watching the YouTube broadcast. Look at that. All right, let's go on to the defense for football. I think we might be able to see a few people, but they're in general, not sure how many people are going to make a huge impact like we might have seen last year. The defensive linemen, I think we could see Bo Robbins come in there, especially with defensive linemen. They get tired very quick, as they have the right to get tired very quick. Defensive linemen, you need a lot of them. Even no matter what scheme you use, even if you use 3 defensive linemen at all times, you need a lot of them. They go through them very quickly. They need breaks and rests. So I think Bo Robbins is definitely going to be a guy that you're going to see. True freshman, a redshirt freshman, Jonathan King, you might be able to see for a few snaps, made a little headway last year. So, Matt, any other linemen or anything to add about Bo and Jonathan?
I mean, Bo's one of the best recruits. Again, he would have been the star recruit of this recruiting class if it hadn't been for Samson James recruiting or committing. So I'm excited for him to come in. He's going to bring in some of that toughness that Carmel football team brings. You know, they're expected to win a state championship every year. Love him or hate him, every year in Indiana. So. But that's a winning mentality he can bring to the team. I would love to see him get some time playing and show off what he's got.
Yeah, we talk about Bo Robbins. I mean, it's a 4-star recruit. He's one of the top 3 or 4 players in the state of Indiana. He's part of a recruiting class that 24/7 is ranked as 36th in the nation. I mean, that's remarkable. IU for a year struggled to crack into the top 70 or top 80. Number 36 in the nation. Last year, the Hoosiers were 49th, according to the same database. So, the recruits are improving, the quality and the quantity are improving. They're coming from within the state, which is exciting. As far as other defensive linemen, don't overlook Jeremy Passmore. He's a Florida kid. Tom Allen talked time and time again about potentially about how this guy constantly bothered Allen during spring practice with, hey, coach, put me on the field. I don't want to be I want to be out there. I didn't come here to sit. And Alan said, hey, you just got to relax a little bit. But that kind of initiative is always looked on positively by coaches. There's also a Samoan defensive tackle, all right? This guy's name is Sio Nofoa Gatotoa. He's a Samoan kid from Florida, 6'2", 321. I mean, he's already built like an NFL defensive lineman. Tom Allen called him out as well, saying he's standing out, he's making an impact. So you might see some Samoan flavor on IU's defensive line this year.
That was a very good pronunciation. Honestly, I kind of wanted to shy away from his name, talking about him because of the name. If you just go on the depth chart and just look at that.
Can we just clip that and then play that every time we talk about him so that I don't have to butcher the name?
Exactly. All right, linebackers. I think we're going to see potentially a lot of Cameron Williams, especially since the linebackers are not solidified in any way. I think Cameron Williams is definitely going to be able to see his share of snaps. For a few plays, you might see some James Miller. But Matt, any other guys?
Nah, not in my opinion. Probably not, no.
Nathan?
No, I'm excited about Williams, though. He's from Andrean High School, which is right by my neck of the woods, region kid. So 4-star recruit. Again, kid, he's no slouch. Bo Robbins, and Samson James are really the three key impact players in this upcoming recruiting class. Like I mentioned earlier, it's looked on so positively by 24/7 Sports. So Williams is going to come in outside linebacker. IU really needs guys who can pressure the quarterback. Tom Allen's talked already about how he's a little bit concerned about the defensive line depth. So maybe Williams comes in and gets after guys like Justin Fields of Ohio State. If he does, he's gonna be on the field, no question about it.
I like his size for a linebacker. 6'3" is a good size for a linebacker. So,
yeah. Especially as I've been doing more research into Tigre, as the height is one of the main reasons is he's having trouble sticking onto an NFL roster. All right, let's move on to the secondary. And Nathan talked about those kind of staple freshman players that are going to have a huge impact. I think you potentially left out these two guys. I think have a very big chance at making a big impact. If you know the person I'm talking about, Nathan, do you know how to pronounce his last name?
I don't know who you're referring to. You're gonna have to.
Josh Sanguinetti.
Yeah. From the University
of
Florida, down my neck of the woods.
So Matt, you should have been watching him play, right? But Josh Sanguinetti, Taiwan Mullen is a guy that has made the rounds through the social media and the internet and everything, of just a guy that you basically have to love as a Hoosier on the defense. Has brothers playing high caliber football. I think those two guys are going to be guys you're definitely going to be able to see get some snaps. Like we've talked about, this secondary is very loaded, so the number of snaps is really actually going to depend on how well they play. They're not just going to get some just to get some snaps. They're going to have to be able to keep producing at a high level. But I definitely think we're going to see those two guys at some point, either as, I don't know how they're built or how they're playing in practice, if they're going to be on the outside or a slot cornerback, but we'll probably get to see those two last names at some point this season.
Oh yeah. Taiwan's shown off a lot of his skills. I think he was at the Under Armour Army All-American game. He was showing off his skills there as well. He's just somebody that's going to come in and bring in that, work ethic straight away. His brother plays for Clemson. They just won the national championship this year, drafted in the first round. So yeah, I think he's going to be great. Sanguinetti, same thing. Look, they're going to bring that Florida high school football caliber playing to the defensive side of the ball, and that's going to be great for the Hoosiers in the future.
If you can see Tom Allen's trend in recruiting, he likes to get those Indiana and Florida players.
Absolutely.
Well, and I liked not only did Taiwan's brother Trayvon play for Clemson up until last year, he had a big interception in Clemson's national title win last season as well. So, it's not like that. It's not like his brother was just some sort of back of the roster filler. Not by any means. Trayvon Mullen was a major impact defensive back for Clemson, and hopefully Taiwan can follow in his footsteps because, hey, I'll take any quality corner that you give me.
Yeah, especially a guy that contributed in the national championship game. Nathan earlier talked about the ranking that 24/7 Sports gave the recruiting class. Like he said, 36 nationally, which is, if you think of Indiana football, you don't ever think that they're in the top 36 in terms of playing. Yeah. Last year, they were 49th. The year before that, 52nd. So you can see, at least recently, they've been around the 50 mark and jumping up to 36th. And Tom Allen even lost out on a couple big recruits that they could have potentially had. So 36 nationally is doing pretty good. Tom Allen's definitely in the right direction. If you look at, don't let the next class of 2020 get you down too much. Right now, he's about 50. That's just because some people commit early, some people don't. So he's definitely getting some recruits already for the next class. But for this year, 8th in the Big Ten. Last year, they were 10th. 11th the year before. They are and beat out Iowa, Minnesota, Maryland, Northwestern, and then of course Illinois and Rutgers. But they beat out those teams for recruits this year, and they weren't too far off from Purdue, who is 5th in the Big Ten. There was a pretty close gap between 5th and 8th. Now there's a very, very close gap between 8th and 11th, but Indiana's getting much better at recruiting. It's got to start obviously showing on the field, but the recruiting is starting to get much better, and it's at least something to get excited about in the offseason when there is no football to be played yet. So let's move on to the social media shout out. Matt, give us your social media post of the week.
Sure. I think this one was the easiest one I've had so far. You got to go look up Trey __ Galloway up on Instagram. Go like his post for him committing. Done deal. # committed, with him posing in front of the great IU midcourt in the north lobby of Simon Scott Assembly Hall, sitting there in his Indiana jersey with those candy stripe pants. You got to go give that a like. Shout out Trey _ Galloway on Instagram. He's going to be a fantastic Hoosier, and I'm excited for him to join the team.
While you're at it, Indiana.HQ for Instagram. Go check those out. Twitter at IndianaHQ, like we've talked about. So add 2 people to your follower list. All right, let's move on to the basketball freshmen. Now, we haven't really talked about Jerome Hunter much yet because, of course, he's now a redshirt freshman from medical injury. There's going to be a lot that we could potentially talk about Jerome Hunter, but I think anyone and everyone, not just us, media, news, podcasters, fans, everyone is very high on Jerome, and almost to the point where I hope it's not too much pressure on Jerome if he's able to play this year. But of course, if we think Jerome is able to play this year, I think everyone expects nothing but basically fireworks and a very refreshing face to the team.
Yeah, and this is a guy who's he's a 6'7" forward who was a top 60 recruit nationally last year. So, he's ranked higher than a guy like Robert Finnessy, who made a huge contribution to IU's team last season. I did see crawling across Twitter earlier this morning some workout video that Jerome Hunter was a part of out in Columbus, Ohio, where he's from. So again, it's not like he's sitting around getting treatments and stuff. No, he's working hard. He's really getting after it. He's trying to improve in various facets of his game. But at the same time, if you ask me, any contribution IU gets from Jerome Hunter this upcoming season will be the cherry on top. It'll be icing on the cake. It'll be a bonus. And this is a guy who can do great things. We just hope that his health works out.
First and foremost. Yep. Matt, would you like to give your primary, maybe once every 2 weeks or so, your very good rant about how much you're looking forward to Jerome Hunter playing this year?
I'm going to save the listeners' ears for that, and I'll wait another week until I inevitably break down next week on the 100th podcast about how much Jerome Hunter is going to mean to this program next year. So I'll wait.
There you go. All right. The 2 incoming freshmen, so the 2 true freshmen that everyone is excited about, Armaan Franklin, of course, and Trayce Jackson Davis. Now, of course, we were able to talk to India Franklin, who is just a great woman to talk to. She's been on not just our podcast, but Hoosier Hysterics, and that was just a great podcast. So if you haven't listened to that, go back. It's still relevant now. But Armaan Franklin, definitely a great guy that is coming into the program. I don't think we're having a lot of character issues at the moment with people coming into the program. And it's just a guy that you think about bleeding, Cream and Crimson, this is going to be a guy that's going to fight for the team. He's going to love it. He's just going to put forth as much effort as he can. The only concern that I have for him, and this is nothing against him, this specific season, everyone is high on everyone on this team. I don't think it's a secret that every single player, all 11 scholarship players, are going to be able to contribute this year. But Archie really does not like to play 11 people during a game. He likes to play 7, 8, 9 at the most players on a team. And so that leaves at least 2, if not 3 people that sit on the bench more than not. So if everyone's healthy, I think Armaan might be one of those guys that's farther at the end of the bench. Nothing against him. I just think there's, hopefully, if we have the progression that some of the other guards, the sophomores and junior and senior guard have, that he'll be able to start to grow, and he doesn't have to jump into a role that he it's gonna go over his head. Hopefully he's going to be able to develop a little bit this year, and I definitely think he's going to get playing time. I think there's no question he's going to be able to see time, especially if there's a game against some of those non-conference teams that you start to blow people out of the water. I think he's going to get a lot of playing time, but hopefully seeing a lot of stuff from him. Hopefully his shooting continues to progress. Like his mom says, it's going to be a refreshing face, and hey, if he can come off the bench for 5 minutes, get a bucket, that's all we need.
Absolutely.
Well, that's the key with Franklin, because there's one thing he can do to get playing time right off the bat, and that's knock down a few threes. Because I think that's a skill set that IU will really cherish this coming season. If he can knock those shots down from the perimeter, maybe even if other parts of his game aren't as advanced or brought along, he'll be on the floor. So if he can show out in practice and knock down some threes and really stand out in that area, Franklin won't be sitting on the bench that much.
Yeah. Matt, do you have anything to add about Armaan Franklin with what you're excited to see for him this year?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd like to see him develop more of his combo guard skills, the ability to come off the bench and be a playmaker. I think the team is going to be better in the future if he can turn himself into more of a playmaker and a distributor than a scorer. So
yeah, because he's also not a tiny guard either, so he's going to be able to have the ability to get into the lane and start making some plays, let alone shooting. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Now another guy that we are very high on, and a guy that will probably see the floor a lot of the time, and a lot of us hope that he'll be able to start, as Trayce Jackson-Davis, our guy that's been recruiting for the past since November 30th, since when he signed at IU. He's been trying to recruit for Indiana. Great guy to love. Matt talked about his backflip last week, which thankfully his backflip, he didn't injure anything. That everything's all well and good. But Trayce Jackson-Davis, we've talked a lot about the lineup podcast that we did. A guy that I'm honestly just excited to see. What are you specifically looking forward to seeing that Trayce Jackson can potentially contribute for this year, Nathan?
Well, look, he provides a scoring punch that IU might need with the departure of Juwan Morgan. Last year at Center Grove, he averaged 22 points a game. He was McDonald's All-American, Indiana Mr. Basketball. This is a guy who can really wreak havoc from 15, 18 feet and in. So if he can show that he can transfer those skills over even against improved Big Ten competition or even Division I basketball competition, he's going to get playing time. IU needs a guy who can drop in 10, 15 points per game. And, even if he's not sharpest defensively, or even if he's not at his peak physical physique just yet, that's okay. If he can, though, convert those mid-range shots, get layups inside, hit some free throws when asked, that I think is the part of his game that IU needs the most this upcoming year.
Yes, and I think you mentioned the word need a lot. I think that is very key for Indiana's success this year. I think they're going to need, they're going to need a lot of help and contributions from Trayce Jackson to be able to continue in the right direction towards trying to make an NCAA tournament. What about you, Matt?
Yep, we're going to need the best Trayce that we can possibly get this year. In order to make the tournament, we're going to need a freshman superstar or superstar in the making this year if we're going to have any shot at making the tournament. I think he can step up into that. Is it fair that he has to have that kind of a season as a freshman? Not exactly, but this team is going to need somebody to carry the offensive and defensive load down in the front court and back court. So, and And Trayce is just one of those guys that could possibly do that. Could be possibly the spark for this team, and he's stepping into a situation that he can make all his own, and he can be, just like Romeo and have a very good season, go to the draft, or he could have an even better season than Romeo, and we make it to the tournament, and maybe he stays. So who knows? So
yep, and if he does have freshman spurts, which everyone's going to have, so maybe even both Armaan and Jerome and Trayce are going to have points during the year that they're going to struggle. I think it's also a good sign that when Trayce is struggling, that we have some depth behind him. If Race can make sure he gets back to being 100% healthy, add him to Duran, Joey, all those people down low. I think it's going to be. I don't think we're definitely going to need him, but if he has those moments where he gets tired, maybe he gets into foul trouble or something, it's not going to be the end of the world.
I did have a question for both of you guys, though, because, look, I think last year in February and March, people were a bit down on Romeo Langford and said, oh, he is good, but he kind of fell below expectations. As far as Trayce Jackson-Davis goes, what are your guys' expectations for him this coming season? I think, in my mind, I've got something like 12.6 boards a game in like 25 minutes. What are your guys' thoughts?
I don't have a problem putting high expectations on Trayce. I think he wants to and is willing and would be able to produce at a high level. Maybe not 12 points, but maybe around 9 or 10 points. I definitely think some boards are good just because he's going to be able to be athletic and do some of that. I think a lot of it also may not necessarily be produced in the stat sheet because he's going to have to be able to learn the pack line, because pack line down low is a little different than most people think it is. He's going to have to try and be able to move quickly, because that's the one point that Duran, when healthy, has had to try and get past, is how to function as a big in the pack line. So I think if his stats are still like 7 or 8 points a game, 3 or 4 rebounds, I think it might be a little disappointing. But if he's still holding his own down low and he becomes a good defender, I think it's definitely going to be able to overlook that.
Yep. And I expect him to be very good on defense, especially blocking the ball. I think he's, for a guy at 6'9", he can play the center, and that's just a testament to how freakishly athletic Trayce is. So that's something I'm excited to see him bring to the team.
Yeah, and I also will put out, if Duran is healthy, Duran is such like Matt said, I think it's going to be incredible to see if Trayce and Duran play, the amount of shot blocking ability down low, but then also how good Duran is at passing the ball from the post. If he can he's great at finding those perimeter guys, but if he can find Joey 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 feet away, that's also going to be something big that I think he's going to be able to do. So I could see, I think expectations should be 8, 9, maybe 10 points. But I definitely think he should and will be able to get to 10, 11, 12 points. And his ceiling could be higher, but I think that's definitely a reasonable guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy, Matt, you said he was 6'9". It seems like the measurements are that he's got a 7 foot or 7'2" wingspan. So yeah, even if he does come in as a shot blocker, that would be extremely valuable to the team. So yeah, I was just curious what you guys thought, because, put some numbers to the expectations, because as you know, IU fans are over the top with these kids. So I was just wondering what you guys were thinking.
Yep. Personally, I think as a guy, he's one of those few guys on the team that you should expect something concrete from him. I think he's going to be able to give that to you, and I think it's going to be a joy to watch someone like Trayce play this year. He's not going to have to be the best player on the team, but he's going to be able to be a guy that's going to be able to thrive in this kind of offense. So I guess we'll have to see. Send us your questions as the audience, because this is normally the segment where we will answer your questions. So if you have a question, even throughout the week, you don't have to wait till Monday or Tuesday for us to post about it. Send us a question. We'll answer it on the podcast. I think some people think that, hey, we'll just maybe mention it somewhere later. No, we'll tell your question, share it on air live so that you can get credit for it as well, and we can talk about it. Some of the best material comes from you guys as well, so don't be shy. Great content comes from you guys. But that about wraps it up for our 99th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and thank you to the live audience for coming out and participating in the chat section. We really appreciate your support. We'll be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. A day after that, it will be our 100th episode. Going to put a little plug in for us. It might be a little different episode, just celebrating how far we've come. Of course, got a long ways to go, but hopefully, especially those longtime listeners, going to be able to just have a little bit of fun, talk about some things on the 100th episode. So look forward to that next week. News and updates come through Twitter, so subscribe to our show so you don't miss out on our weekly shows. Most importantly, though, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is the only way how we grow this podcast so we can reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.